Konnichiwa, this is the Shogunstein. This is some initial thoughts on the new stock market themed game from the Flyer Brothers, Market Mayhem, the action-packed stock trading game. It's a stock market themed game for 2 to 4 players. They're showing ages 12 plus. And just in the interest of full disclosure, they did send us a review copy. So just to be transparent, the Flyer Brothers did send us a copy for review purposes. So I'm going to look at this game. And again, these are some initial thoughts based on 2 ways. One is as a someone that likes board games. So I'm going to look at it from a parent and a board gaming point of view. Parent of someone who likes board games. And I'm also going to look at it because I do have a side hustle in social studies, and that side hustle at times has included teaching economics and government and various disciplines in the social studies. So I'm going to look at it as a gamer slash parent of a gamer, and also from a someone with a side hustle in social studies. Obviously, my main gig is a YouTuber, but I do have that side hustle in social studies. So this is a stock market themed game, and when we look at this, we need to look at it, in my opinion, based on intended audience. That's something that we do when we do teach kids AP. We ask them to look at documents and primary sources in terms of intended audience. So I think in terms of market mayhem, we need to look at the game in terms of intended audience. So if you go into a typical classroom that probably teaches economics or some sort of social studies, you're going to see monopoly boards. You can see they're going to have monopoly games. And one issue with monopoly in the classroom is monopoly takes forever. Monopoly is a game that takes a long time. So unless you're going to spend a lot of class time doing it, you're not going to get the whole monopoly game in. So you'll see that the board here looks like a monopoly board. And I did a whole video focusing on the board. But just to kind of summarize a bit, one of the things that I do see online when people have seen this game is people have been critical of the idea that they use a monopoly-like board. And in that other video, I talked about how the gameplay actually doesn't have anything to do with how Monopoly plays. But I think, and this is what I'm getting at with the Monopoly boards, a great thing about this game is I think this game, both as a parent and as someone with a side hustle in social studies, this is a good game to teach people. Again, I think intended audience is probably teens, but it also could work with young adults who don't necessarily know how the stock market works. Now, in the case of a classroom, since a lot of students are familiar with Monopoly, and in fact that those teachers probably have Monopoly games in their classroom, the fact that this board looks like a Monopoly board makes it more accessible for those new gamers. So let me say this, as a gamer, as an experienced gamer, this is more of what we would say a gateway level game. So if you're a hardcore gamer, something like Stockpile has definitely more to it. And again, if you know how the stock market works, you're probably going to want to, if you're into financial based games and you have a good background in finance, something like Stockpile is probably a better bet, especially if you're into more, heavier games. And there are other games that use like a stock market type mechanism. Something that we've talked about was East India Trading Company recently also, which has a stock market type mechanism to it. And even something like Raccoon Tycoon has a stock market kind of element. But again, in terms of intended audience, if you have, kids that are, middle school or high school who are not really familiar with, microeconomics or how the stock market works, or even if you have, younger adults who aren't as familiar with the stock market, this is going to be a more accessible option than something like Again, I'm going to pick on stock. I love Stockpile, but Stockpile has a lot to it. There's a lot of expansions, takes up the whole table, takes a long time to play. This plays quicker. So again, back to Monopoly, you can bring a Monopoly board to school, but Monopoly takes forever. You're not going to finish that game. This game, they're saying it takes about 45 minutes. I found it played a little longer if you're going to do the full 4. Once every time you go around the board and you pass the opening bell, that's as a year. So the base rules are you're going to go around 4 times. That I found that ran a little longer than the 45 minutes, especially because there's a math element to the game. But I think if you were going to bring this to the classroom, now this game, another nice thing about this game is it has, I think it's 15 different variants you can play. One of the variants was that you can shorten the game. You can shorten it to 2 years or 3 years, which is 2 or 3 times around the board. That is something you can do in a class period. So again, if you have a class period that's about an hour and you do this for 2 rounds, you can get a full game in. Again, it's the shorter rules, shorter game, but you can play the shortened version and get it done in the class period. You can't do that with Monopoly. And again, even at home too, depending on your kids, how much of a gamer they are or aren't, if they're not, depending on the attention span, things like that, you can adjust how many rounds you play. And again, there are different variants. So one of the variants that we played recently was the recession variant, which there are market mayhem cards, which are, event cards. Also, it can manipulate the stocks, give you insider information. And with the recession variant, you take out you take out one of each stock, each industry of the stock, you take out one positive card, so then the market cards have more negative effects, so you deal with like a recession. So that is one of the kind of neat things about this game, because you do see as you're playing the influence of insider information. So if you wonder how, not to get too political here, but you wonder how members of Congress of both parties, know when to buy or sell stock, they're getting insider information. Or the whole concept of insider information, the whole reason we have an SEC, again, this game with the market mayhem cards, and with some of the spaces you can land on when you're going to know whether or not industries are going to go up or they're going to go down. It's basically that insider information, which does give people an advantage, and it's illegal, but it does manipulate. And again, you look at how certain members of Congress have gotten so rich because they're using insider information, or even the whole thing with Martha Stewart. So I like that the game does that. Also, it also shows you when you're playing, the more volatile stocks are the ones that are tied into more industries. So again, if you got something like here where it's just transportation, the airline, something up here that's just energy. But again, if you're going to buy stocks, that could be tech and consumer and health. As they're in more industries, the stock price can go up and down more. So I like that it teaches that. Also, because you have this information, when should you buy, when should you sell? And it also teaches, again, when you're buying or selling or manipulating the price, if you start buying stocks that other people have, then they can't really mess up, because if you have the same stock and they have the same stock, maybe they're not going to mess with it as much. So I think there's a lot to think of. It teaches a lot of good basic economic concepts when you're playing. Again, I'm trying to win, but if I ruin your stock and I have that same stock, I'm not going to do that. Also, the game has you do math, because you're going to be keeping track of what stock you buy, how many shares, price per share, how much you got to figure out how much you spent, what's the dividend, what's the total dividend. So you're going to be filling this out. Same thing with the sales. What did it sell for? Did you sell it for more or less? Did you make money? Did you lose money? There is math involved. So you're having fun, but at the same time, you are doing math skills, which is good, because I don't know about you. I was recently at the fast food place, and my bill was $28. I gave them $40, and even with the cash register, they couldn't figure out how much change to give me. So anytime you're doing basic math skills and you're having fun, it's a good thing. Now, Little Shogunstein had suggested that, again, to make it a little easier, because this is sort of like an intro kind of game, they do everything in terms of hundreds. Something that Little Shogunstein mentioned is in that his stock market project in class, they use percentages. So that would be a recommendation we'd make. But I could see how that could make it maybe a little too difficult if you're trying to do like a beginner type game. So again, back to intended audience. If you are someone that's very knowledgeable in finance and you've played stock market games before, this is probably not something you're going to bring to your group of experienced gamers. I don't think this is who this is for. I think this really is for people that aren't into modern board gaming as much, and especially, kids who don't have a lot of basic economic literacy. If you think about it, they might take a financial math class in school, maybe one, and they might not take economics until senior year, where they are going to do a stock market project. But again, a lot of those stock market projects, everything is computerized. When we did the stock market project, back in the day, you had to get the newspaper, you had to do the math like you're doing here on the sheet. So, and then also you get calculators, you get money, you get the dice you're using. So they do give you some nice components. I think the MSRP on this is about $40. I think it's selling on Amazon for like $34, $35. So if you're into like the Dave Ramsey, Financial Peace University, again, the idea that you want to teach people some basic economic concepts, this is a good option. So again, a lot of these kids know about sports gambling. They know the online sports gambling, which is not a good thing, and it's a way to potentially lose a lot of money. And I think if a kid knows sports gambling, but they don't know about the stock market, this is the type of thing you want to sit down with them and play, because in the long run, unless they get real lucky, the stock market is where they're going to end up making more money long term. They might have a 529 for college. They might have the parents might have a 401k. Again, it's basic economics, and it shows you a lot of the things that can manipulate between these event, basically the market mayhem cards, or like event type cards that could affect the stock price. Now again, with the cards, maybe one criticism that we had is there are a couple of these Rich or Ruin cards which are really OP. So they could really impact your game. So you could take them out if you're worried about, you're doing something more math-based throughout the game and you get one of these cards and it could mess up your whole game. So something that we thought about, you could house rule taking these Rich or Ruin cards out. But other than that, again, it does show you how these, again, if, the unethical lobbyists get involved in the defense industry, it could affect the stock price. So people are seeing how current events could affect the stock market. We just had an election. It had an effect on the stock market. So overall, initial thoughts, I would say both in terms of gamer. So speaking as a gamer, my son plays heavier games. So this, for us, as again, with also my son is really into finance and economics. He had a lot of fun with this. He had fun messing with my stock prices and figuring out what to buy, what to sell. But he's probably a little more advanced than the intended audiences on this game. So I would say in terms of gamer, this is more of an intro type game for people, again, younger, newer to board games. And that's why the board not looking radically different from a game that people are familiar with, I think is a good thing. So I think for, if I had younger kids, my son's about to go to college. So, and he again has a lot of interest in finance. He had a lot of fun playing this, and he had a lot of fun, messing with me and, doing the stocks. But ultimately, I think, when we're going to play, we're going to stick to something like a stockpile. If I had, kids that were younger or really didn't know about this, this is a good way to teach them some economic literacy, which is something that's missing now. When I was in my side hustle years ago, the Federal Reserve in New York made a big push to include more economics in non-economic classes. So I was teaching global history and geography, and they had these wonderful workshops where they were trying to include more economics in what we teach. I don't see that anymore. Again, their economic literacy, which should be very important. Economics is probably one of the most important classes a kid can take. They don't get a lot of econ. Maybe they get it senior year. Maybe they're in a financial math. So that's where I think this could be really useful. As a classroom teacher, if I was teaching econ, and again, if I had a lot of kids, which I probably do or would have, that really don't know how the stock market works, I think this does teach some very important basic principles that they could really use. And then again, once you do this in conjunction with a more automated stock market game, where again, they don't have to do all the math by hand, I think that's good. So something like this first, and then let them get onto the Yahoo Finance or one of those sites that does a lot of the math for you. I like the fact that they actually do have to do the math, that to figure out how many shares they bought, what it's worth, did it go up, did it go down, did I win, did I lose? I think these are important concepts. And I also like the fact that the game scales. Because again, Monopoly, or we used to sometimes try to play Risk with the kids too, it just takes forever. You can scale this to, 2 rounds, 3 rounds, and you could get it played in a class period. And again, I think the fact that it looks a bit like Monopoly, even though it doesn't play like Monopoly, will not scare off those new gamers. So again, are you an older, more experienced gamer with a lot of knowledge of the stock market? This is probably not the intended audience for you. I think if you're new to gaming, or you're in a classroom setting, or you don't really know a lot about the stock market, this is a fun way to learn what goes on, the factors that can increase or decrease a stock, how you figure out if you made money, lost money, how current events can play in, how insider information can benefit. I think it's a fun way to do it. And again, it's a way that's not going to scare people away. And again, Stockpile, I keep mentioning Stockpile because that's a very popular stock market-based game. There's a lot of stuff. There's a lot of components to that. And if someone's not a gamer or they're new, that could be kind of like an intimidating. This is not intimidating. This is easy to learn. The rule book is very short. Everything is explained very well. There's also some videos online. I saw Meeple University had a very good video. So it's real easy to get into the game and get it right to the table and start playing. And I think if the goal is to teach people basic microeconomics, especially young people, then it's been very successful. So again, the intended audience, I think if you have, again, middle school to high school aged kids, or if you have, maybe even someone that's in college that just really doesn't understand how, basic microeconomics, basic capitalism, basic finance, because we don't do enough of that. I got to be honest with you. I do have a side hustle in social studies. Econ does not get the attention it deserves. And, you could make a case, okay, you taught someone about the Ottoman Empire or the Eastern Roman Empire. You can make a good case. When am I ever going to use that again? I understand that. I think basic economic concepts is something that you can use all the time. And I think if the goal of this game, if the intended audience was to teach basic economics, basic stock market principles in a fun way for more beginners, then this is a great option, and I think it does a great job. And I'm going to be bringing this in to play with some of the people that have a side hustle teaching economics and see what they think. But just some initial thoughts, again, in terms of intended audience, if we're teaching basic stock market, basic economics, very successful here and a fun way to do it. This is the Shogunstein Hour.